sweet, fresh meat.
In this episode of Best Horror Movie You Never Saw, we take a look back at the 2000 satirical horror comedy Cherry Falls, directed by Macbeth's Geoffrey Wright and starring Brittany Murphy, Jay Mohr, and Michael Biehn. What makes Cherry Falls special is its satirical and subversive take on the horror slasher subgenre. While this by itself is nothing new, Scream already skewered the genre almost 5 years prior. Cherry Falls, however, deconstructs the virgins are always safe trope to the nth degree.
All three victims appeared to be virgins.
And thus speaks more clearly and bitingly to the societal structures that fail women.
Well, what are we supposed to tell our kids?
To go out and get laid if they want to feel safe?
No, I'm not saying that.
I can't lock my daughter up in the basement.
I wouldn't worry about it, Victor.
While Scream, for the most part, only talked about the virgin trope as it pertained to horror movies in general, rather than society as a whole. Now, the plot initially has a pretty standard horror slasher setup, even opening with a grisly kill that sets the story in motion, and then introduces us to our virginal and goody two-shoes protagonist, Jody Markin, played by Brittany Murphy, who's being pressured into sex by her boyfriend Kenny, played by Gabriel Mann. She rebuffs him due to her strict sheriff father Brent, played by the Terminator's Michael Biehn, who is eventually called in to investigate the bloody murder from the beginning of the film, where he discovers the word virgin has been carved with a knife into both of the victims' thighs.
As you can see on the inside left thigh, there's a 1-inch deep carving of the word virgin.
After another murder occurs, where the victim also turns out to be a virgin, the sheriff comes to the unfortunate conclusion that the killer is specifically targeting virgins. Then, during a disastrous town meeting at the school's gym where the sheriff tries to explain to the parents of the town about the killer's MO, Jody is attacked by the killer, in what turns out to be a pretty tense sequence. And during the course of it, she realizes the killer is in fact an older woman, whose face scares her father after describing it to a police sketch artist. Jody then discovers, through some sleuthing, the killer's name was Laura Lee Sherman, an introverted outsider who was raped by 4 popular boys in town, which included the school's principal Tom Sizzler, played by Joe Inscoe.
If word gets back to these kids that somebody's murdering virgins, we're gonna have a goddamn fuckfest on our hands.
And dun dun dun, Jody's dad, who was a star quarterback at the time. Meanwhile, all the other students in the school are setting up a wild orgy in an abandoned building, as the news that all the murder victims were virgins has reached them, thus they're trying to take themselves off the table by having sex first.
God, you're not gonna believe this.
What?
Word got out that your attacker has this thing for virgins. So everyone's decided to take themselves off the endangered species list. We're talking Hyman Holocaust here.
However, Jody now feels she has nowhere to turn to. Her mom is a drunk, nervous wreck who victim blames Laura Lee.
And besides, what are you going to tell the police? That a drunken girl had sex with 3 drunken boys? I mean, you said it was rape.
Her father is a potential rapist, and her boyfriend Kenny are currently on the outs. First, he breaks up with her because of not going all the way. Then, when they try to reconcile, he's the one who stops Jody's advances because he fears that she's only using him, not actually doing it because she likes him.
I just want you to be with me, because you want to be with me.
And even blames her for having the hots for their teacher, Leonard Marlson, played by Jay Mohr.
Do you think that that's how it is between people, Mr. Marliston?
I heard that you broke up with Kenny.
So she won't even be able to lose her virginity before the killer strikes again. What would she do? I guess you just have to watch the film. Now, what makes this movie great is definitely the satirical edge it brings to the table. The story is ultimately about the double standards women face in society that overly scrutinizes their sex lives.
I'm not a child anymore, Dad.
Have you gone further than that? Listen, can you go further than you have?
And refuses to adequately punish and oftentimes even rewards sexual offenders. This is of course true of the story, where rapist authority figures like the principal and Jody's sheriff father are given full reign to the pillars of the community. However, despite all that, the film is neither dour or didactic, and it's actually pretty fun and darkly comical.
Coffee over.
You gotta come on.
This is my post. I can't just split.
It uses the slasher subgenre to talk about these anti-authoritarian, feminist, and sex-positive themes in a way that is digestible and entertaining. While there are of course some serious moments, It's also full of scenes like this.
Wait until they try to put their dicks in you.
Please don't say they need help with that.
Always.
Like all good satire, it lets itself have some fun, but never uses that as an excuse to not hit hard when need be. The cast is also uniformly great, with Brittany Murphy doing a good job as a strong female lead. She's clever, intuitive, smart, and even is a bit flawed, such as her flirtations with Mohr's Mr. Marlson.
I finished my T.S. Eliot paper.
Great. Wow.
I want you to know I really love his work.
Good.
Her performance goes a long way with giving this film and its themes a sense of emotional integrity and gravitas. It's also fun seeing her play a virginal character, especially after her iconic role in the classic Clueless.
Why am I even listening to you to begin with? You're a virgin who can't drive.
Michael Biehn also does an amazing job cycling through the different emotions his character, Sheriff Brent, goes through. He's at once a loving and caring, if strict father, then a potential monster, and then someone who could be all those things at once, coming to terms with his transgressions.
God help me, I knew what I was doing.
God, Daddy.
Creating a complex and three-dimensional character in the process. In fact, Biehn almost didn't take the role because he read the first 15 pages and thought it was just another bog-standard teen slasher film until his agent urged him to finish it, and he then fell in love with the smart, satirical tone the story eventually adopts. Jay Mohr also does a surprisingly good job in a role that isn't his normal smarmy douche persona that he perfected in Jerry Maguire and subsequent roles. Here he plays both subdued and sympathetic.
Naturally, you're all horrified by the sudden and senseless loss of your classmates,
as well as fun and campy later. Director Geoffrey Wright also doesn't skimp on the gore or the gruesomeness of the killings, making sure that the threat was real and visceral, keeping the tension up throughout the film, and making sure it felt that no one was ever truly safe. There are also some very surprisingly suspenseful moments. Finally, there's a score by Walter Wazawa, which is much more eclectic than you normally hear in a film like this, giving everything a techno edge. It makes sense, as Wazawa worked in the music department for 1995's Mortal Kombat film, one of the first mainstream films to be scored almost entirely through EDM. Unfortunately, the film was met with setback after setback during its production, and by all accounts, director Geoffrey Wright fell behind schedule and over budget pretty much immediately. This included things like the production securing permission to shoot at Thomas Jefferson High School in Richmond, Virginia, only to find out too late that it shared the building and grounds with the Governor's School for Government and International Studies, meaning they started filming at the end of the regular school day, only to be interrupted an hour later when the gifted students were released from class. To secure the set, doors had been locked and hallways had been blocked, preventing students from exiting. Things didn't get much better once the citizens of Richmond began boycotting the production after being told just the synopsis about kids setting up an orgy to lose their virginity to escape the clutches of a psycho serial killer who targets virgins. Without it being mentioned, it's a satire. Thus, the city thought they were using the school to shoot a porno. Eventually, the delays got so bad that much of what you see in the film was in fact the first take. But that wasn't the only issue to plague the film, as Cherry Falls was having trouble securing an R rating from the MPAA, constantly being slapped with the NC-17. This was mostly due to the orgy scene during the, for lack of a better term, climax of the film, where while in the script the scene was much more chaste, director Wright decided to film it with the teens fully nude, making it almost impossible to get the coveted R rating. This is all compounded by the fact that at the time of the movie's impending release, the US Senate was having hearings over sex and violence in teen films. And threw a spotlight on the movie and USA Films in particular, the new fledgling production company distributing the film, and didn't want their first release to defy what the Senate said they should do. In the end, the film was never given an official domestic theatrical release, and was eventually sent to air as a TV movie in a heavily edited fashion on the USA Network, thus becoming the most expensive TV movie ever made at over $14 million. Which is a shame, as this was one of the better post-Scream slasher deconstructions and deserved more of a chance to find an audience. Anyway, as said before, the film is a sharp, dark satire that has something deeper to say about modern society, especially in terms of gender issues and the unfortunate lack of justice given to victims of sexual abuse, including victim blaming and societal shunning.
No. It's a stinking hypocritical world, isn't it, Brent? Where rapists become the pillars of the community.
We've seen it happen with many people in positions of power recently, and while it's not a new subject, it's nice to see a film, and a genre film at that, tackle the societal ill with insight, thrills, and humor.
Did you ever play Deathquake?
Okay. But you have to wear rubber.
Now, Cherry Falls is unfortunately not available for streaming anywhere at the moment due to some rights issues, but Scream Factory does have a Blu-ray available to purchase if you were so inclined. It's honestly worth checking out if given the chance, flaws and all. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you have any suggestions for us for any future episodes, please leave a suggestion in the comments below.